This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Carol Tyler. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek, one of the two guys with PhDs talking about comics. And on this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Carol Tyler, who was at Small Press Expo this past weekend. But before we get to that conversation, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you'll find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials will be at 45% off the cover price. Sometimes at 50% off of the cover, but often you can find discounts that are more impressive than that. And since I'll be talking with Carol Tyler in this episode, it's worth noting that you can find her book, Soldier's Heart, at 35% off of the cover price. But you know, you're going to find a lot of great discounts at Discount Comic Book Service, so definitely check them out. Go to their website, dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. While I was at SPX this past weekend, I made it a point to talk with Carol Tyler. Her book from last year, Soldier's Heart, The Campaign to Understand My World War II Veteran Father, A Daughter's Memoir, was nominated for an Ignatz Award in the Outstanding Graphic Novel category. As you might expect, we spent most of our time talking about this most moving memoir. We also discussed Carol's 3-volume You'll Never Know series, the books that would eventually become Soldier's Heart, as well as her earlier efforts appearing in women's comics and Weirdo. And, as you'll hear in our conversation, we also talked about her work as a comedian and her deep love of the Beatles, a topic that will be the subject of her next book, which should be released about a year from now. I found this to be a most insightful and moving interview, and I'm very happy to share it with you now. I'm here with Carol Tyler. Her book, Soldier's Heart, was released last fall from Fantagraphics, but it is SPX 2016, and I have the pleasure of talking with her for the show. Carol, how is SPX going for you?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's got a lot of energy, seeing new and familiar faces both.
Yeah. Now, you were telling me as we were looking for a place to record, and by the way, we're in the business center of the hotel. Center.
We're doing some business in here.
Yeah, that's right. So it's much more quiet than it is on the floor. But as we were trying to find a place to talk, you said that, you can never get used to these cons.
Oh, no. Well, I have kind of a sedentary life in that I don't see hundreds of people with great art and colors and shapes and sounds going past me on a daily basis. So I don't want to say sedentary. Let's just say it's very visually stimulating. It's very much, there's a buzz in there like a beehive. And so there's a lot to see and take in, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming.
Now, do you think that this experience has anything to do with the fact that you're from the Midwest? I used to live in the Midwest, Indiana, in fact. I'm a Purdue grad.
Oh, okay.
So I'm familiar with some territory that you discuss quite a bit in your comics. But do you think that kind of Middle America background growing up contrasts sharply with the kind of buzz that these kind of events are?
Well, no, I think it's a convergence of people. Today they're all excited. People have their work. They've been working on projects. They're debuting work. They're here. They love it. So that just brings a level of excitement. And I like to go and see what people are doing. I like it. I basically am in my studio with a couple of dogs. The biggest thrill is letting the dogs out during the middle of the day, and I do teach class and see kids there. But then, it's phenomenal when a bunch of people get together and they're showing comics, showing new work. It's cool.
Well, let's talk a bit about your Soldier's Heart, because that, I mentioned that it came out last fall, but actually this is a project that has been around for quite a while. That first volume of You'll Never Know, was it 2009? Was that when it was released?
Yes. In total, the project took 10 years from the time I started sketching out how I was going to do it until the book was released in October of last year. Mm-hmm. So I had, if you look at the cover of the book, the picture of my dad as a soldier, they asked me at Fantagraphics, all right, now we got to get a cover for the big book. Well, I had just buried my father, and within 3 days I had to come home and draw a picture of him.
Oh, my God.
For the cover. So there's a lot of emotion that I'm living with these days. I guess when I started, I wasn't in the emotion as much. I was in the thoughts about how to tell the story of what I was perceiving was going on with my dad and the things that he told me and the discovery excitement of, oh, well, this document says this and that. And at the same time, my life was falling apart and how to kind of putting all that together. So there's that combination of thoughts and feelings that started the book, but at the end of the book was much more difficult in that I had lost the people who I featured in the book. And like I was saying to someone earlier, I'm about 1/4 of an inch away from falling apart at any time. Because so many, even Kim Thompson, the guy who said, let's do this project, gave me the okay from Fantagraphics, he died before the book was finished. So it's been very, it's very different on the outside of looking back and seeing what I spent 10 years doing in the most difficult circumstances. I mean, I had to take the pages of that book back and forth between my studio in Cincinnati, my home, and across the state of Indiana to the nursing home. And I'd have a deadline. I had to get this page done, and I'd be dragging the pages and drawing on those little bedside tables and over here, and then going over here to see my dad and working on the kitchen table. So I had to finish the book, but I also had to deal with the issues of everyone that was featured in the book was having serious difficulties.
Now, you mentioned Kim Thompson as being integral part of the book's genesis. So how did what eventually turned into Soldier's Heart come about?
I had the experience. I've been an autobiographical cartoonist since the beginning. And Fantagraphics his attitude was, yeah, sure, we'll do it. we had this hippie handshake thing for years, me and Kim. So he was fine. He was cool with it. And I just said, oh, my dad started talking about the war. I'm going to do this. I kind of gave him the idea, gave him some samples, and just sort of, yeah, he was for it. Sure, let's do it. So it was very casual. But it was also at the time when I had shifted into a much more polished, a much more, what's the right word? I'd shifted away from kind of the body, black and white, hack it out comics that I was doing from Weirdo days in the 80s, to something more artistic, let's say, in that I could use color and could do things. I chose the landscape format. It was a problem, apparently. Big problem. The distributors didn't know how to deal with it. It doesn't fit on
What, the size format?
The landscape format, like of the You'll Never Know trilogy. It falls off our shelves. Everybody's complaining. So Gary had to sit me down and convince me that it had to be smaller and it had to be, in the reprint, putting the three together, soft cover. But I made a lot of changes and added a whole new content to the final.
Okay. Well, what are some of the differences between the original trilogy that came out as the You Never Know volumes and this one volume, Soldier's Heart?
New content. Chapters. page numbers. What a dumbass. I forgot to put page numbers on things. And I was able to go back in and find places that I thought maybe didn't transition as well, or maybe there need to be a little bit more explanation. So I think there's something like 40 new pages, I don't know, something 50 pages. There's a bunch of new pages, and the whole back section when Dad goes, or when his coming home story, I didn't even get it into book 3 because, I had to go to a funeral or something. I didn't have time to get it done. Deadlines, real deadlines. Whew. So the coming home story is in this. So in other words, he went over there, but how did he get back? Well, that was as crazy as anything that happened to him over there. So that's in this book. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I resolved some things. There were a couple places where I felt like I needed to maybe explain this a little bit more or work this little angle a little bit more and clarify. There's some drawings that I've changed. You see, you're at home and you're working on something and you're kind of like in it and you're doing it. And then you see it in print and you're like, oh, God, I hate the way that looks. So there were several places where I had to go back in and change it. Perfectionist, never ends.
Now, from the very beginning, I'm assuming that you had wanted to do this originally in 3 separate books.
No, I always wanted one book.
Oh, so you wanted one originally. And where did that decision come that you should release them individually in 3 different volumes?
Old people. In other words, my parents, I didn't think they would make it. You don't know how long they're going to go. So I thought, well, if I work the first part, which is pretty much, these are nice people, mm-hmm. We'll let the bad stuff come in book 2 and book 3. So book 1, I could get out, and I did. And my dad pretty much used it as a business card down at the VA. So he'd get in his scooter, he'd have the books. He was giving them out like candy bars, like, hey, look, here's a book about me. He didn't really understand it, but he saw his pictures there, and he saw his soldier boy stuff, and I'm telling his story, and he was, oh, yeah, this is me. Hey, they did a book on me. Book 2, my mom, I think, they were both alive for book 2. My mom did not live to see book 3. My dad did not live to see Soldier's Heart, neither did my sister. And they're in the books. Neither did my brother-in-law. Kim did not see Soldier's Heart. I think did he see book 3? Maybe not.
Did he die in 2012 or 2013? I think book 3 came out in 2012. I think.
So he saw that. He didn't see Soldier's Heart. The complete. So I didn't say at the beginning, well, I better do this because they're going to die. But I had a real strong sense that I was dealing with fragile people, and I needed time to have completion points. I needed goals for myself, and I needed satisfaction places. Comics is a grueling, isolating activity. And you need a buzz now and then. You need to know if you're on track or if it's interesting. And it was very, very exciting with book 1 that it was in the New York Times book review. And it got a rave review. And I was like, oh, now I'm on to something. I wish I could draw faster. And I will be doing a totally different style in my next book, which is, I don't want to say it's a follow-up to Soldier's Heart, but it definitely approaches the topic of what happened to the people I wrote about. Oh. And how their deaths affected me profoundly. So I'm a different person on this end of Soldier's Heart than I was going into it.
Now, when I asked you about the decision to publish the story, or at least a version of it, in 3 different installments and then the final book, nowhere in your answer did you say anything about this is what the publisher wanted. And I found it curious that the reasons were logistical, dealing with your parents, wanting to make sure that they got to see something that you're writing about them, but also your own need for some kind of feedback as an artist, getting something out there. Now, once the first book, the first You'll Never Know, was released and you got feedback, you got the reviews, the New York Times listing. Did that affect the trajectory of what you were doing or eventually did in books 2 and 3 with the story?
No. I knew where I was. I knew what the end of the story. I knew what the end of the story was. Mm-hmm. I knew the emotion and the place I needed to take my readers to. Nothing that anybody said influenced or affected anything. Because I'm kind of laser beam on what it is I'm trying to say. And it wasn't because of the attention that I went forward. It was because I felt an imperative to tell the story and to represent what I believe is probably the biggest unwritten story of the 20th century, and that is most of the guys that came back from combat in World War II had troubles. Never identified, never dealt with. These were our dads. So when I think of mass movements like Beatlemania or the hippie era or Est or involvement in drug, anything that hit my generation, you have to look at, well, what happened? Well, the guys came back fucked up. That affects you when you're emotionally neglected, or your dads are too busy, or they've learned to stuff their emotions. So I felt like this needs to be said. But sadly, it's like, a little too late. Because that's done. But then, oh, wait a minute, we had the Iraq War, and we had the Afghanistan War. But even though and you know the numbers, suicides, I still say it, soldiers go there, they have to do terrible things, they come back changed, regardless of politics. It's a life shaper. And it affects families.
You mentioned the World War II generation, which has been called, the greatest generation.
The greatest stuffers of their emotions.
Yeah, and that definitely comes through in Soldier's Heart. Now, outside of maybe every now and again Tom Brokaw doing a special about World War II or World War II veterans, do you feel that military service during that time, during the 1940s, tends to be forgotten now in light of subsequent conflicts?
I think that service has been hijacked, or the soldier experience has been hijacked by the right. It's been used for an agenda that, come on. It's a loaded question. I'm anti-war, but I also understand there are sons of bitches out there that want to kill us. I'm anti-aggression mostly, but this thing has been going on for what? As long as humans have been alive? Aggressive people want to bop heads on other people and take their stuff, and it's a never-ending, terrible dance of, you got something, I want it, I hate you, all this stuff. And I don't know what's to be done other than to say, this is not the way to solve our problems. This is not how to be. So all I can do in this book is say, hey, this guy my dad was messed up, and it messed me up, but I'm not going to let it mess up my kid. So there's a buck stops here vibe about my book. And I don't, what's so weird is the military community has not embraced this book.
Not at all?
Because, no. Because it's about, wait a minute, a soldier like that? I mean, when it first came out, I went to one of these patriotic thingy. I thought, oh, my book, there was old World War II planes and tables set up, and I thought, this is the perfect venue. people didn't like it because I was talking about somebody who had been dealing with mental illness. And mental illness, as you know, it's ridiculous in this day and age that we look at it as something that's your own problem or it's shameful. It's like, you're going to cut your arm and bleed? Okay, that's obvious, you're bleeding. But like I say in the book, my dad had his brain rattled, and he had amnesia. And they said, so he was working on a little project, and the guy says, oh, you're faking. You're just trying to get out of combat. He was in combat. He had a brain injury. They gave him a hard time. They called him a wuss and a pussy and all this stuff because he wasn't, like, ready to go be all gung-ho. That warrior ethos thing. So, no, guys that are charged up, young men charged up, want to go fucking kill somebody, they're not going to be motivated by that book. But when the soldiers come home and they're busted to hell and their families are suffering, that's the book for them.
Have you found, like, over the past several years, there's been more attention given to the VA and some of the problems with the VA?
Excuse me. Which is one of the reasons why the book sometimes, I think, hasn't sold as well as it could, because people think it's about the military. Mm-hmm. It's about a man who was damaged by war. And if you know what the term soldier's heart comes from, Civil War, mm-hmm. That's what they called it when you had shell shock, when you couldn't cope. My dad said we were drunk the whole time. It was the only way you could get through the day. Mm-hmm. We're all fucking drunk the whole time. Because you didn't know if the guy standing right next to you was going to get it or it was going to be you. Life was cheap. So I think that this book's trajectory over its lifetime will come slowly.
That it'll be appreciated more
as time goes on. Right. Yes, absolutely. But you had asked about the VA.
Yeah, with more attention given to problems with the VA and how to iron those out, I would think that a book like yours would resonate with that kind of environment.
I have tried so hard to get the VA and the mental health community to let's get together, and I've offered my services. I mean, I've brought soldiers into my classroom. Soldiers straight off the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan, mm-hmm. who are so twisted and in turmoil, thinking, the power of the pen, telling a story is going to help you, right? And I've had some pretty brilliant moments with veterans in my class. But overall, to say, hey, this could be a guiding document to help a family, they're not embracing it. So at a certain point, you just say, fine. I did. I've tried to work with the VA. In fact, the person in charge of the nationwide mental health PTSD facility is in Cincinnati, where I live. And I have tried so many times to get this woman's attention. And she said, because it doesn't come through the therapeutic model, you can't just show up with a book and say, hey, this will help. It's almost like they have to control it all or invent it all or something. I don't know. So all I can say is it's a resource that's out there, and anybody who suffers, you're going to read that. You're not going to feel so all alone with what you're dealing with.
And I think one of the things that's so powerful about this book is actually embedded in the subtitle of that second volume, which is Collateral Damage. Mm-hmm. And this is where, in the story, things take a much darker turn. It's not only how it's affecting your father, Chuck, but it's how his experience affected everyone in his life. And he may come across as difficult, as a real bastard, as unthinking, but there's a reason for that. And so it's this collateral damage, I think, that makes this applicable in a much broader way than just a book about a veteran who had problems and was damaged.
Right. And, I wish that there was a way to convey that more with the cover, because I think right now the cover just says Soldier Guy. Mm-hmm. And I think at first I wanted a picture of, there was a little drawing of me kind of turning away from that. I think that would have been good, but it's what it is. Mm-hmm. You turn it over on the back, you can see some other pictures. That's fine. But yes, it's in there. It's the heart of the book, in that he had an experience that profoundly changed him. He couldn't recover from it. He tried. He built a lot of buildings, had a good, seemed like a good life. But the emotional damage was undeniable. And for me, I wasn't going to allow it to happen to my kid. Because, at the time, let's see, Justin's father was also the father of my child. Mm-hmm. His father was also war damaged. His was much less hands-on. My dad saw, blown up body parts, but his was to drop bombs. So it's a different kind of psycho relationship to the war, where it's abstract. You're killing people, but you don't see it.
Whereas your father actually had his hands on it.
He had to step over, and he had to roll his vehicle over bodies because they said, just go. And he'd be like, well, I want to go around. You couldn't go around, or you'd go off a cliff, or you'd fall into a ditch, or you'd go in the mud. So they literally had to run trucks over people. I mean, it's horrible.
And, one of the things you do early in the book, and this is in the very first volume, is that you give a list of characters, and not just your father. You list him, your mother, yourself, your husband Justin Green, and your daughter. In other words, these are the players in this drama. So someone coming to this for the first time, I would think, would say, okay, this is a story about all of these guys, yet most of the press you hear coming from Soldier's Heart is all about your dad, but it's about the entire family around him.
Yeah. That didn't come through very much in the marketing, and I wish that there was more about how in the middle of my dad's coming forward with his big story and my big realization, my life was falling apart. That's as big of a story as anything. How do you deal with what I had to face at that time? How do you deal with the onset of mental illness in my own child? This was new territory for me. She was my little girl. Now she's jumping out the window. What? It's hard. New turf, new territory. So that's very much part of it. And trying to come to a place of wanting to resolve it. Like, what? How do you... There's no script. How do you do this? My next book will go to a lot of this, more of the people part. It's not the big soldier story anymore. My next book talks about the aftermath of loss, of all the real people I've been talking about for years in my books. It's very hard to do. So I will say the next book that I'm doing, being as difficult as it is, I'm going to jump into a happy spot for 1 year. Actually for 2, because my next book, the imminent book, is about seeing the Beatles in 1965 at age 13. When people were passing away and I was inheriting stuff, in my mom's stuff, she had kept a box of everything from mine from 8th grade, and I had actually had the wherewithal at age 13 to keep a journal about the impending Beatles concert. I was a total Beatlemaniac. So I started a blog it was going to be August 20th, 2015, 50th anniversary of seeing them. So I thought, wow, I've got this journal I kept, and I thought, wait a minute, nobody knows who I am, who this girl is that went to the concert, so I need to build a story around who this girl is. So I started a blog and made new artwork and new material and writing, and I would post stuff as 13 years old. Being 13, okay, I'm blogging. I had this thing called Fab4Mania was the name of the blog. and I had a great following, and I'd post stuff. Come March, okay, it started in like February, late March, my dad's diagnosis comes in real time. He's got cancer. His time is limited. And I'm 13 years old. My dad's dying. But I have to continue to be 13 years old and do the blog through his death. up until, and follow it all the way through until just before the concert. Because I didn't publish the actual journal on the blog because I want people to buy the book. And I didn't have a publisher yet. I didn't know what I was going to do because I was just so mixed into dealing with my dad's estate and everything. So I just found out recently that, yes, Fantagraphics is going to publish my book about seeing the Beatles. It will be out next year. Don't know the title yet, but it's something about the Beatles by Carol Tyler. It may be Fab Four Mania, I'm not sure. But it's got a lot of new it's all drawings, it's handwritten stuff, it's typed pages, and it's like a slice of looking into the girl who was 13. And what was so archingly amazing to me in putting this blog together and going back and looking at my old 8th grade stuff in the journal, I was on my own during that time. My parents didn't give a fuck about my Beatlemania or who I liked. I couldn't get them to be interested. I mean, I'm writing in my journal. It's like the day before the concert, and nobody took me to get a dress. And they've been promising all along, and it was never important enough to anybody.
And what concert was it that you saw the Beatles?
At Comiskey Park. Well, they called it White Sox Park, August 20th, 1965. Somehow I managed to get there, a little girl with no resources or power, living in Fox Lake, Illinois, in 1965. Somehow, was straight across from them. I saw the whole concert, and it was such a life-changing event. It set me on the course of love for music. It turned me on to the possibility of being myself, that I could actually, they brought something. They brought something to me that I still thank them for. They still amaze me, that music. Mm-hmm. They're beings. It was phenomenal what happened. So I'll be happily taking the foray back into being 13 and doing that book while simultaneously doing the book about losing everybody and processing their stuff.
So these are two different projects. There's the Beatles.
Different projects.
Wow.
The Beatle project, you see, I pretty much have it written. So it's just a matter of retooling a few things like I did with Soldier's Heart. Getting the cover, making it into the thing. Because I wrote all the content. It was on the blog.
Is it still available?
No, I took it down because I think if it's on the blog, they're not going to buy the books.
Right.
So I would post stuff, leave it up for a while, and then I'd take it down. And I walked people through the months up to it. I had so many people following this blog. And people are crying for it. Where's this book? So it's like now that I've talked to Gary, now I get to, I don't know, I think the official launch date, I'm not sure, but it will be debuting at SPX. And because I'm a performer, I don't know if you know if I'm this, but I'm a performer. I used to front bands and do comedy and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm very comfortable in front of an audience. So I'm going to be, with the launch of the book, did I say this already? I'm going to be performing?
You hadn't said, no, not with the...
I'm going to be doing... I'm the front person that gets everybody excited about singing Chains or Boys or She Loves You or whatever the hell it is, because we all know the tunes. We know how they sound. And get people excited. So I'll be performing as well as having the book.
And that's next year's SPX.
Next year. I'll be up there kicking my feet and getting everybody clapping. And I performed I was in Italy and London this past summer, and I met up with some of my comedy people, Joshua Brody and Brian Seff, in London, and we did a set of Beatle music, because it was like, sing the Beatles, and so it's like, I know the words to every single Beatles song that ever was, all the words, and I can sing them from the beginning with all the inflections. It's like, that never left me. And it's like, we're going to do this thing? Okay, great. So we're up there, and I was like, I just went crazy, and I knew all the words, and I got the crowd going. It felt so good to be performing again. So that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'm going to be kicking ass, having a good time.
Wow, so something to look forward to next year, a new book and your performance at SPX.
Although, okay, I don't know. This is not going to air till after the Ignatzes, but if I win tonight, I'm going to get up and sing a Rihanna song. I've got a Rihanna song rehearsed.
Oh.
And if I win that Ignatz, I'm going to be performing that.
Okay, so I should bring my recording equipment just in case.
You should, because it's a pretty mean performance. I got that one down.
Now, we should mention to our listeners, of course, by the time this goes up, the Ignatz Awards will already have been given. But, you're up for an Ignatz this year, Soldier's Heart. And actually, I've met you for the first time about, 2.5 hours ago. This is before the doors open.
Right.
And you were introduced, you said, hey, I've got a book up. And you didn't even know who I was yet, even though we had a scheduled interview.
I'm lobbying.
You're lobbying around.
Yeah.
And so you're going to do more of that schmoozing over the next several hours.
Gum and candy. I'm bribing people. At this point, bless everyone who's ever nominated me. I think Soldier's Heart in total, well, you'll never know in Soldier's Heart, I think I had 13 Eisner nominations. Maybe 11. Maybe this is my 4th Ignatz. Okay. I don't win these awards. And I'm like, why? I mean, I've lost to great people, but I thought, this can't go on. So I was telling my students, you can always count on, I was standing up there testifying, excuse me, I burped. You can always count on a mini comic whenever you need one. And I thought, damn it, that's what I'm going to do. So I made a mini comic called The Nominee. And it's 8 panels where this Nancy, I always put the spikes on my ponytail here to look like Nancy. And I'm always getting after my students to, will you stop with those anime eyes, the big eyes with the... So I thought, all right, I'll use that. I got the big anime eyes and the spiky Nancy hair, and my students don't like to draw hands, so I hid the hands and stuff. But the comic basically meets up with a woman named, superhero named Lois Language. And she is friends with Clark or something like that. Yeah, Clark Kent, Lois Lane. Who can't be there, he's on assignment, but she gives her a tip that if she follows Lois's instructions, Lois hands her an envelope and says, here, do what this says. The clue is that it starts with a B, what the nominee has to do. And the nominee thinks, oh, is it Botox? Do I need to do that? How about bling? Beatlemania? No! And you turn the back cover, the payoff joke. Bribery. You vote for me, I will give you a piece of gum.
So you do have this mini comic, and you actually have it.
I've got the comic here. Boom. The nominee. She says, what does it take to get a brick? Right? See, there's the bling eyes and it goes through. And I did it straight up style. I did it as a teaching tool so that my students would know how to do a mini comic. And I said, and I'm going to be taking it to I got the Ernie Bushmiller 3 Rocks.
That's right.
The Simplified House. And of course, the polka dotted skirt, just like Nancy. And see, here she meets Lois Language. Comics can't apologize. He can't be here. But he recommends that you try drawing cute kittens and then throw in some graphic art porn like maybe Zipatone. See, there they are. And then she says, yeah, Botox, bling. No, bribery. Vote for me, you get candy.
Well, you'll have to give me one of those, and I can put them in the show notes when the interview goes up.
Yes.
So now, okay, you're having fun, obviously, with that mini comic. Do you think, though, when it comes to awards, and I guess not just in the area of comics, but we can limit ourselves to comics, that there is some kind of maybe unspoken formula about what tends to win? Or do you not give much credence to awards, even though it's always nice to win?
I loved. Okay, I misspoke in that and Soldier's Heart won this year. It won the Society of Illustrators Gold Award for long form comic. Mm-hmm. So I was so happy to receive that award, and it won the Slate.com prize, best graphic novel. So those feel good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to win. I mean, I think it's weird because when I look at the people in the category that I'm with, it's like, wait a minute, I know all these people and I love them all. Mm-hmm. And they're going to pick. And it's weird because people vote for whoever they feel like they want to vote for, or they know, or they're familiar with the title or something like that. And, I'm kind of a odd person. I'm not, I'm either performing and I'm on, or I'm at home in isolation. Mm-hmm. So I don't have like a community set up per se. Like some of these kids now that are coming out, it seems like they know everybody. Mm-hmm. They're so connected.
They have their built-in fan base.
Yeah. And I have to try to break through that to say, well, why don't you vote for me? So I feel somewhat desperate. I don't really want to do that, but hell, it's fun. Do it this year.
Now, you were mentioning a little while ago, along with the upcoming Beatles book, the other work that kind of picks up in some ways where Soldier's Heart leaves off, and that is what happens to the lives of others after the passing of the soldier, after the passing of the person who had such a big impact in others' lives. And that leads me to something that I've always felt about Soldier's Heart, and that doesn't get near enough attention from what I've seen, and that is, this is a book about you. I mean, obviously, it is your father that gets all the attention. I mean, he's front and center. Obviously, on the cover you mentioned that's his image. But this is a book very much about you and what you're going through. I mean, I believe that with the vast majority of memoirs, that they're just as much, at least, about the actual writer than that person that they're writing about. Because there has to be a reason why the author is writing about her or his subject matter to begin with. So there has to be something about the author's story that he or she wants to tell. I saw Soldier's Heart is at least as much your story in very intimate ways that surprised me when I first read it. I knew that I would expect to get parts of you in this story. It's your father, after all. But we really get into some stuff that's going on with you in your life at that time. Yeah. I mean, do you feel that this is at least as much your story, your autobiography, as it is the story of your father and your life with him?
You're the first person who has pointed that out.
You're kidding, really?
Because it's always about Dad, the soldier, and I'm the good daughter. But I go through an evolution in here, too. And I'm the seeker. Mm-hmm. I'm the one who's trying to figure out the answers. And
you dedicate partly to the seekers out there.
Mm-hmm. Because I kind of realized that's how I've spent a good deal of my life, is either in service to or helper. And yet, I'm trying to figure it out. The follow-up, I don't even want to call it a follow-up, the next book, the hard book, I mean, the Beatles book, it's about me, a 13-year-old girl, but it's what it is. But the one I'm doing that's more difficult, that is kind of related to that, sort of, in that it's the same people. It's only me telling what it's like to be left with nobody left and all their stuff. Mm-hmm. And I go into the feelings of that, and the difficulty of that, and the place that takes you to. I can't even handle it half the time. It's like, I'm living this. Oh, this poor person, give yourself a hug, honey. It's the hardest thing. 'Cause, I don't want to say that anybody's grief is worse or anything like that, but I feel like I got slammed with a lot in a short period of time. Oh, and by the way, did I mention that during this whole time there was a drug addict living in our house who fucking stole us blind? So I'm even going to tell you the difficulties. And it goes down to the nitty-gritty. Somebody keeps, during all of this drama, somebody keeps calling the house some bill collector, and I'm not that person. So you have to solve that. What? Who the fuck? I am not Charles Taylor, for Christ's sake. Will you stop calling here? Or when my dad died, I got his mail. And I'm still getting, somebody will call up and say, "Hi, I'm talking to Mr. Tyler." I said, "You do? Well, he's fucking dead. Stop calling." telemarketing, the gift that keeps on giving after you're gone.
Yeah. Now, this new book that you're working on, the one that you've called kind of a hard book to continue writing.
I have a title.
Okay. Can you tell us?
Yes. 6 Blenders, Death, Life, and Stuff.
6 Blenders, Life, Death, and Stuff.
Death. 6 Blenders, Death, Life, and Stuff. And I'll tell you, why 6 blenders? Because I have freaking 6 blenders now. That was Mom's, that was Jim's, this belonged to my best friend, and so on. I've got duplicates of everything. I have 37 hammers. I have 37 hammers right now. I couldn't find a hammer in the house 10 years ago. I was like, oh, God. But I have my dad. He had quadruple emanations, generational emanations of every tool known to mankind. So take a hammer. Okay, then he had the hammer he had in the 50s. Then there's the hammer that you need for when you're pounding in a thing, sledgehammer. Then there's a chisel hammer. Then there's, all the hammers then there's, of course, electric, nail gun. But then there's his dad's hammer, and then his grandfather's hammer, and then they had their emanations. So when I line them all up on the table, it's like I count 37 hammers. In fact, I had to make shelves in my basement that were 8 feet long, and just next to each other. Screwdrivers, every size, every shape, every possible screw thing, every screw, every bolt, every nut. And this is just my dad's workshop. And he was a pack rat, and so was my mom. So I had okay, now I got a bunch of coats. My brothers are like, I just throw the coats in the dumpster. It's like, no, I went to Penny's with her. I remember when she selected these coats. These are good coats. So I had to do things like find the women's shelter and take them. The dismantling of their things has been the history of my active mourning. And I just feel like I haven't even really started. It's just so raw. It's so there still.
So the coats and the hammers and the screwdrivers, that's a big part of what this new book is about.
It's about processing that. Because once I do, they're gone.
Do you feel that with this new book, once you're done with that and that's out, then readers can go back to look at Soldier's Heart in a way that they didn't originally? In other words, this new book may give them different eyes to look at what's going on in Soldier's Heart, to see much more of this as being a story of Carol Tyler. Just as much as it is Chuck Tyler.
Yes. I think that it's a much more raw story.
This new book.
Yes. The 6 blenders. It's much more raw. It's extremely hard for me to do. Extremely painful. Which is why I tap into the joy of the 13, being 13, as much as I can. Because this other part, this other 6 blenders story, is just, it's a tsunami for me. And like I said, I'm a quarter of an inch away from falling apart. So I thought of okay, so how can I simplify this for myself? Because I am not doing 53 colors and dipping ink and spending 10 years. I don't want to be 10 years in a grief zone, although I will be for the rest of my life. But I don't want to actively, I don't think it's healthy. So what's the quickest way I can get this thing, just puke my guts out here and just give, because I also feel like what I'm giving forward here, I'm giving people a tool and a gift and a mirror and a window. A tool for coping with their own. We all lose people. A gift, the gift of insight. Insight, there's the window. The mirror, look at yourself. I mean, I can think of 10,000 metaphors. But the idea is, I really believe that this book has value. I thought Soldier's Heart has value, and when I started, because of the wars that were coming, it does have a certain value. But I feel this has a different value because it's much more raw emotionally. And I will have to say this. Since I have completely altered the course of my life because of what happened by losing everyone, there's a different person writing and drawing the stories. The servant of humanity, S.H., soldier's heart. That's who I was. Servant. I helped everyone. That girl does not exist anymore. There's a new person stepped up to the plate to tell the next stories, one of whom is a delightfully excited girl who also is telling the other story on the other end.
How difficult is it to juxtapose those two sides of yourself at the same time? I mean, I would think that's going to be something that could easily break someone.
I could go, it's like, am I going to go mad? I'm not going to let this stuff drive me mad, but it is so hard. You can't tell me that people go through mourning. I mean, they cover it with drugs and, I mean, why are we so medicated? Why is there a heroin epidemic in this country? Because we don't talk about what hurts us. I'm talking about what hurts us. I'm willing to take it for the team here. I'm going to fully go into the pain of loss. And I've done it. And the toll it takes, it's like, it's worth it, you know? Because the tremendous joy that I know will come when I'm done, because the book doesn't leave you in the dark. My number one goal, and I say this to my students, I take my hands and I go like this, raise us up. The work must raise up the reader. Why would you do anything that did anything else? Your job is to raise us up. So I feel the strength building, and I feel my purpose. Like people say, oh, Soldier's Heart, that's her big book. You watch what's coming. That's the work that's going to blow people away, if you want to say that. Because I'm pulling out everything I know. It's the best I can do. And I don't want to build it up. What if it's a fucking terrible piece of shit? And it might be, I don't know, overblown, something or other. All I know is if you speak your truth and you speak it with honesty, you can't go wrong.
So we're going to have, in the next year or so, the
Fab Four Mania.
That's right, the Fab Four Mania, a year from now. And then around the same time, maybe a little after, would be the Six Splendors.
That's going to take me a little bit of time. But I have some shortcuts. Like I said, I'm not going to do the 53 colors, so I'm going to do the whole thing in pencil.
Oh, okay. And we won't get that in installments, right?
No. That's going to be one big volume. And a lot of it is just, it's going to be text. Like, I can't tell you, I'm not going to tell you the framework of the book or any of that kind of stuff. It's really awesome because I'm doing fantasy elements. I'm using devices I have never tried before that I've been teaching in the classroom for a long. I ask my kids, try this, try this, try this. And it's like, man, I'm going to do some of this shit, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's different, and it's a little more raw because it reflects the raw emotion. But I'm thinking I need to bang that sucker out in 3 years or I'm going to kill myself. You know, I don't want to go on. I know a 10-year thing. No installments. Nope. I'm just going to put the pedal to the metal because I just bought a farm in Kentucky, and there's nothing to distract me but cows and horses and God beautiful. How do you say this? The most gorgeous landscape I have ever encountered at this farm that I bought.
Well, you like that region of the country. You know, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky. I mean, they're right there together.
This place in Kentucky is hillier, just slightly, but I'm on a plateau, so I kind of have and the hills are more, they're not that like peak and valley type thing. They're more like expanses of big, like you can see big sky. And I'll tell you, the most magnificent thing that happened, I went out there last week and I have a dog that, two. She's a mess. She showed up at the door, stray, some years ago. She's wild. And I have to put a cowbell around her neck or she'll to warn other animals because she goes after them. But I took her out to the farm to look around. And she, these feral dogs came running over. And she looked at me like, see ya, and took off with these feral dogs. And I was like running down this field. Two, come back, two, get away from those dogs. Because, one's got that mange or something. But she was running wild and free, and I thought, this is so perfect for her. This is such a beautiful place. And then eventually I had to call her back because she'd gotten this man's barn. And so she's a city dog. It's like, whoa, I'm free. I'm going to do this. And so I called her back, got her in the house, and had to go back to Cincinnati. So I'm driving along, it's like, most gorgeous sunset ever. And the way that the hills lay out there, they're like I said, they're like commanding vista. It doesn't have that, it's not tight. It's loose and wide. Mm-hmm. So I'm driving, and I happened to look over. I had to stop the car and get out because it was a moment. Those two dogs, the hill was in front of me, and the sunset was like spectacular, and they were silhouettes against like one of those flaming, beautiful sunsets. Mm-hmm. And I just looked up and I thought, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. I'm coming back to live here. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do these books here.
So you're going to bring those good memories or those memories to this new location and maybe transform those memories in the process.
I cannot. Where I did Soldier's Heart, I live in the city. I live in the urban core. And it was a constant distraction with drug dealers and cars. 3 a.m, somebody busting up stolen air conditioners and God. I mean, I know all my neighbors and I love them dearly, but fuck, I don't want to hear basketball at 2 a.m. It's just like, shut up. When can I ever work? And I got into working at like almost staying up all night because I was looking for that type of quiet that you need to just kind of get into the thoughts and stuff. And I could never really get that on the street, fragments. And the fragments of running around helping everybody. But out there, I don't have to fight. I will have to fight myself for not wanting to stop. Wait, how am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? I'm going to be the problem. I'm going to want to stop and go outside. I got to see the cow. Mm-hmm. Oh, look how beautiful they are. I got to take a picture.
Those are the good kind of distractions as opposed to the 2
Shut the fuck up! And I can never say anything because it's just better if I keep my mouth shut. Mm. I have run drug dealers away. I have chased them down the street with a pitchfork. I have, in front of my house.
An actual pitchfork?
Well, I was turning my compost heap. I ripped, where I live now in Cincinnati, I ripped out my front lawn and I put in a prairie. Over years first I put down plastic and I did all this stuff. And so I totally organic. I grow my vegetables, and it's like city plot. It's like crazy. But one time I was out there, and I had a pitchfork because I'm turning my grass clippings. The man who mows other people's lawns gives me all the grass clippings because it makes great mulch. So I was flipping this thing, and it's like, oh, God damn it, because the people from Kentucky come across. It's an epidemic. You know about the heroin epidemic. Mm-hmm. It's bad. Well, somebody on my street likes the deal. I don't know. The Kentucky people show up and they park there, and then they wait for the dealer who comes and drives by and gives them the drugs out the window. Mm-hmm. And it's done in like 2 seconds. So the minute the Kentucky cars are all beat to hell cars show up, a bunch of white people, mess. They're just a mess. You can tell. You can look at them. Got their babies in the backseat. They're there to score their heroin. So I just go out there and I'll say, "Are you here? Are you looking for one of my cousins? They're not here. Why don't you get out of here?" I've had to chase them. You have to be careful. I have not. I've stood out there with my pitchfork. I have chased the Kentucky cars with my pitchfork. I leave the dealers alone. They're packing.
Yeah. Well, you'll be to Kentucky soon enough, right?
I'm not saying there ain't meth and all kinds of other shit going on out there. Who knows, pit bull, puppy mills or something like that. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of shit. But, like you said, and I've had beautiful moments. I've met great people, and I have loved living where I'm at. But I just feel like, okay, I did Soldier's Heart here in the city. I'm kind of flipping the whole thing over. What do they call it? Flip the script? I'm shifting the whole thing over. Yes, I'm working with difficult material and the same people and some things like that. But yeah, it helps to have a different context, definitely. And like when I went to Italy this summer on the fellowship, just being in that 14th century castle, it was amazing how quickly I could pull myself back into the nursing home in Indiana, the hospital room in Terre Haute, the places where the drama occurred, the convent, my sister's bedside. So I can never escape those places, but I need to be able to breathe in between the times when I do visit those places in the work itself. Yeah.
Well, Carol, good luck in finishing up both those projects, both the harder one that we'll see, a couple years, 3 years down the road, and then the Beatles book, which we'll see next year.
Hoot. Yeah, it'll be a hoot. I can't wait to perform and sing those songs. You name a song, baby, I know the words, and I'm ready to sing.
Well, thanks for taking the time and talking with me. I've had a really good time.
Oh, good. Yeah, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you for asking me.
I want to thank Carol Tyler for coming on the Comics Alternative and talking about Soldier's Heart and the future projects she has underway. As you heard in the interview, Carol had promised to sing on stage later that evening should she win an Ignatz Award. I regret that Soldier's Heart wasn't the recipient of that honor, and not only because, in my humble opinion, it was the most deserving of the prize, but also because it deprived us of one memorable acceptance speech. Let me also send a big thank you out to Jack Cohen at Fantagraphics for helping to set up this interview with Carol. And if you want to learn more about Carol Tyler's work, then you would do well to head on over to the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service, where you can find Soldier's Heart at 30% off of the cover price. That's dcbservice.com. I promise you, you can't find any better discounts than theirs. And after you do check out DCB Service, get in touch with me and let me know what you think about my conversation with Carol. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message from the comfort of your own desktop computer or mobile device using SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys at comicsalternative.com, or you can contact me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over the social media spheres, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also listen to us on TuneIn, on Spotify, and on iHeartRadio. And if you're an Android user, on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and the comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Carol Tyler, and we have a lot more lined up from our visit to SPX this past weekend. Be sure to check back throughout the week for more of those episodes. And until then, I'm Derek, and I'll be talking with you later.